Welcome to VNN, your source of fresh and interesting weekly news topics. Today we're going to look at the war in Iran, why China won't help Iran the same way the West has invested billions into Ukraine, how despite China's feuds with the West, money reigns supreme, and how your gas prices are only going up. First, let's take a look at why China is even a friend in the first place. Trade. The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission, or USC ESRC, stated that China reported around $10 billion in bilateral trade with Iran in 2025. It was noted, however, that this does not include the $31 billion in unreported oil exports to China in the same year. It can be assumed that the unreported oil exports is to get around the US-led sanctions. Now, if there was one thing that China does help Iran with, it is circumventing Western sanctions. Termed the Axis of Evasion by Atlantic Council, Iran has supplied drones and drone components, anti-ship and surface-to-air missiles, and several other parts for military applications that have been restricted under Western economic measures. Dual-use exports to Iran in 2025 for semiconductors and batteries reached its peak at around $14 million, which has undoubtedly helped the Iran drone program, as much of its program, including the Shahed series, rely on imported electronics, batteries, semiconductors, and navigation components. In 2021, China pledged up to $400 billion in investments over 25 years for Iran. However, even with these investments into helping its close ally, China has still hesitated to provide real help or anything comparable to what is seen with Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal reports that Chinese companies remain hesitant to carry out investments due to the Western sanctions, all while the Chinese government itself continues to invest massive amounts of money into Saudi Arabia and the UAE through trade, over quadruple the trade between China and Iran. While China is providing access to vital war resources, it seems the PRC is really only interested in the economic incentives from trade Iran. If they were serious about helping Iran afloat during the war, they would diversify away from trade with Iranian enemies, like Europe has done with Russian oil and gas, and invest more into anti-air systems and planes for Iran, which seems to be what Iran is lacking the most. Since the war in Ukraine, Ukraine has received just over $350 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian aid, with around $175 billion of that being just military aid. The US itself provided around $134 billion of aid in total, with $64 billion in military aid. This would have included the Bradleys, the M1 Abrams, and the several types of self-propelled artillery and anti-air systems and radars. While the war has only started in late February in Iran, billions of Western aid for Ukraine was planned out in the very early months of the war. However, we have not seen that with China, suggesting that they just might not be as concerned of Iran to continue as a state as the West was with Ukraine. This all stems from the difference in objectives. China is more focused on its growth, as it wants to fight against the West's control of the international system. On top of that, China is already facing a large population decline. Due to China's one-child policy in 1980, China has faced an incredible slowdown on their population growth, and has even started to decline back in 2020. While this might not be as disastrous as one might think right off the bat, it does have pretty horrible implications. Mainly, their limited growth means that more and more people are becoming old, increasing the dependency ratio and increasing the economic burden on society, as more and more people are reaching retirement and not working. From this, we can see that if China were to send more military equipment, or worse yet, troops, China would be facing a steeper population decline and slower growth, which is exactly what China is looking to avoid to continue its climb to the top. Another factor we haven't mentioned yet is what I like to coin as the CUM effect, capitalism under war. I could not think of a memorable acronym, so just turn the W from war upside down to make it the CUM effect. It goes like this. Autocratic economies like China, due to the state control over the military industry, tend to not receive the same amount of benefits war might provide for democratic economies. In democratic countries, there is less of a tendency for structural mismanagement in the military by autocrats like Xi Jinping, while also having more economic incentives for people to invest in the economy, as war pays good. An article by A Vision of Humanity details as well, although I recommend you read the blog by Noah Smith on No Opinion. It takes a deep dive into many of the results of the Cum effect. All in all, China is afraid that the war in Iran will hurt its bottom line. China remains hesitant to send arms to Iran, as the war continuing longer would end up hurting China more than if they were to lose Iran as an ally. Remember, much of the vital resources China needs for its growing empire, particularly oil and gas, comes from the Middle East, almost half of it through the Strait of Hormuz. While China continues to provide economic and some military assistance to Iran, it remains to be seen as to the amount of help the West has provided Ukraine. With the ceasefire signed just last night, it is unclear whether China will use the opportunity to send Iran some real assistance. The People's Republic is simply not as interested in helping their ally, as they're infinitely more worried about the growth of their economy, and as such, more worried about simply ending the war sooner, no matter the cost to their ally, Iran. That was VNN, your weekly dose of interesting news topics.